Hey everyone, welcome back to The Problem With, the show where I sit down and give you a problem with, but tell you why it's not inherently a bad thing. I know, this show is a mixed bag of emotions. You should see Dan when we're filming it. He's crying. Dan has one emotion. It's a lot of tears. But anyway, today we're going to talk about the problem with Superman, and more specifically, the Superman cartoon. And if you're like, what Superman cartoon? Well, there was a show. It was on Adult Swim at like 11 p.m. at night or something crazy late. I don't know. I watched it on HBO Max I'm sorry, Max, because why keep the HBO name? Anyway, I watched it on Max the next day, so I don't really know what time it aired, but I'm pretty sure it was like weirdly late at night. But it was a new interpretation, a new vision of Superman, and that's kind of what I want to talk about here. What I thought about that show, what the problem with that show is, and the problem inherently with Superman. Today's episode is brought to you by two sponsors. First off, we've got Hatch and Jalapeno. Jalapeno on a stick, if you get that joke, you're as old as I am. Anyway, Hatch and Jalapeno is a hot sauce that I have made with a buddy of mine. We have whiskey in there, we have jalapenos. It's a very mild sauce, and it's also 0 calories, because if you're like me, wanting to put up all those heavy weights, you kind of want to watch your calories. So you can check out the store down below if you want to support me and my new endeavor, my own hot sauce brand. And when we sell out of this one, we're going to make a hot version. So I'd love to have you a part of that. But it's also brought to you today by this large-breasted woman, also known as Gamer Supps. Gamer Supps is an energy drink brand where they put women on cups. And they're normally anime themed, and it's awesome, but they also just make great energy drinks. This one right here is Blue Raspberry. It's the one I'm drinking at the moment, and I love them. I love this brand, and they've been super supportive of us, so if you want to support the channel, check out my hot sauce, use the code COMICS at GamerSupps, and let's get into the problem with Superman. So the problem with Superman, and the problem with the Superman TV show, the My Adventures of Superman TV show, or no, it's the My Adventures with My Best Friend Superman TV show. No, it's Supermanime if you're watching our review over on Absolutely, where Dan and Hassan reviewed this on a weekly basis. They called it Supermanime. And if you're a fan of anime and manga, we can just tell you what it actually is. That time I was reincarnated as the best friend of Superman. If you're an anime manga fan and you know what isekai is, you're going to get that joke. Otherwise, I look weird. Anyway, I want to get to the point. Superman, I'm not going to go through his entire history. We're talking 1939, I think was the introduction, maybe 1940. It's him and Batman are in that whole range. Either way, Superman has been around too long for me to tell you his whole history. The basic concept of Superman is he is the last survivor of an alien planet. The alien planet, depending on the story, is either super advanced or on par with us. They were either dealing with their own rebellions or they dealt with an earthquake. Jor-El and his mother were super important scientists or they were rebel leaders. It changes depending on his depiction. We don't need to worry about that. But Superman was then sent to the U.S., where he landed at the Kent farm, became a superhero. Basically, over time, he links to humanity through Ma and Pa Kent, through his love with Lois Lane, through his best friend Jimmy Olsen, and through his son, depending on which era of Superman you are looking at. Those are the core tenets of what makes Superman. And then having these links to humanity, Superman is supposed to be our hero, our beacon of light, our hope in the entire DC universe. It's his ability and his hope that keeps Batman from going over the edge. It keeps Wonder Woman from invading the US because she's, an Amazon and Themyscira. None of them have ever really done this, and whenever it's referenced like why Batman hasn't crossed over the edge, it's because Superman is the best of us, is basically how he words it. Wonder Woman's the same thing. Whenever we see a storyline where there is no Superman, normally she's like an evil war dictator monarch. And it kind of applies to most of the superheroes. I mean, if we go back to the story Justice League The Nail, which is a story in which Superman did land, but he became Amish, and we all know the Amish are evil. But anyway, he became Amish, and because he was Amish, he wasn't Superman. And because he wasn't Superman, we had a whole bunch of problems go over. When he landed in Russia, he became Red Sun. He was just a dictator and evil. It's just, when he changes that, it changes everything. Superman is the keystone to the DC universe. And we all know that story. And it is kind of boring at times. Superman is full of hope. We know he's going to win. Right now in Dawn of DC, we're telling some really fun Superman stories, but they're going the way you would expect them to go. It's not out there. It's not crazy. It's not weird. It's Superman stories. And because Superman is all about his link to humanity, his stories are easy to predict. And since his stories are easy to predict, they're not as interesting as, say, a Batman story. Now, I know some people are going to be like, I can predict every single Batman story. And cool, good for you. I think you're lying. But anyway, there's Batman stories you can't predict. There isn't. You know, when Batman had his back broken, no one saw that coming. When Batman ended up in a labyrinth full of drugs, no one saw that coming. When Batman got addicted to dope, no one saw that coming. Or maybe you did. Congratulations. I'm not going to argue with you. The same thing happens to Wonder Woman stories and Green Lantern stories and Flash stories, but Superman stories end up into a very predictable era because he can't cut loose. He can't go insane. He's not a detective. It normally comes down to fist fighting. And if we tell a story outside of that, it's not fist fighting, but he just gets a little smarter, which is why I think people like changes to the Superman mythos. It's why I think stories like Red Sun, The Nail, these stories do well. And it's why I think people are obsessed with evil Superman. Now, evil Superman is a trope that I'm tired of. Injustice did a great job with evil Superman. And I think the problem I have with Injustice, I didn't go into this in the problem with Injustice because the problem with Injustice was about how they won't let it die. But my personal problem with Injustice is that I don't think it's inherently a bad storyline. But John put it best with his Road to Injustice storyline he just did. Batman should have stepped up at some point. Batman trying to stop evil Superman made sense, but at some point, Batman should have been like, Clark, let's just talk. I'm your friend for life. Let's talk this out. And they never do that. They never sit down and just talk out the actual issues. Things in Injustice continually ramp up. And you're supposed to be like, well, it ramped up because Batman's got too much pride. And that is true. Batman does. But it shouldn't ramp up because Superman has too much pride. That's part of the Superman character. Superman's character is that he's full of hope. He is the light that guides everyone through the DC universe, and pride should not be the reason he doesn't have that sit down with Batman. Now, maybe there was a moment in the books, but it doesn't matter. I don't remember if there was like a direct moment where Superman's like, Bruce, can we just sit down and talk? Pretty sure that it was all about like, Bruce, listen to me. Like that kind of, let's sit down and talk. But I'm not here to discuss Injustice. I'm here to discuss evil Superman. People love the idea of evil Superman. But it's one of those ideas that only works so many times. You got to have all the core tenets of Superman, right? But then you end up with a boring Superman, in my opinion. I mean, I know some people just like a classic storyline. When writers come in and try to alter that, sometimes it goes great. Peter J. Tomasi did an incredible storyline with Superman in which he had his son, John. Long story short, John was the son of Superman with Lois Lane, but not from the proper timeline at the time. New 52 Superman was too young, but then we had Convergence, and in Convergence, pre-crisis Superman, who was in his mid-30s, with a wife who was in her mid-30s, they had a son because in Convergence, he didn't have powers, so there was no chance in the son hurting Lois. There is a story in a what-if universe in which the baby kicked Lois and it killed her. But being in Convergence, we had a shot of that not happening, so they were able to have a son with Kryptonian powers. Then we had a great storyline in which that version of Superman merged with the New 52 Superman. That's not the that's the super confusing version, but just at the end of the day, 35-year-old Superman became main Superman and he had a son. So the storyline was then all about Superman teaching his son how to be him, how to find his link to humanity, how to control his powers, and how they are here to help everybody. Everybody loves that storyline. That storyline was great. Brian Michael Bendis came in, changed Peter J. Tomasi's storyline by kicking out the kid, and decided to bring Superman back to the way he was in the 50s, which I still don't understand why that was a decision, which was pre-marriage and pre a whole bunch of other stuff, and we're going to focus on the original car that Superman damaged, and I don't know what happened after that, because I stopped reading, and apparently so did most people, because it got canceled. But anyway, the story was about Metropolis and Superman, but the point I'm making is Superman very easily moves back into boring. And that is the big core problem with Superman. So we try to spice it up by making him evil. Another evil Superman that everyone really loves and has fallen in love with in the last couple of years is Homelander. The big difference between Homelander and Superman is that Superman was raised by an elderly couple who just wanted to raise him as their son, while Homelander was raised by a corporation. This corporation told him that he's bigger, faster, stronger than everybody. You all remember that scene that likes to make the rounds from Homelander and the boys where he's standing on stage and they're like, oh, he's going to apologize for his actions. And he's like, no, I'm not. You don't want someone who apologizes. I'm faster. I'm stronger. I'm better than all of you. That's what happens to Superman. That's the evil Superman people want to see go evil. I don't know what it is about us enjoying somebody with so much more power than us going evil. but people want to see it. But the problem with that is it can only go in one direction, or it can only get. Superman's very much like a black and white yin and yang situation where he's either the best of the best in the entire DC universe, or he's literally a full-blown villain called Homelander or Ultraman or Injustice Superman. He's never in the, or Omni-Man. Omni-Man would be like the closest to being in the middle of the whole thing, and even he just goes straight evil eventually. And as a fun side note, my brother and I were both trying to lose weight together. And he said, how have I lost more weight than him? And I linked him the clip of Homelander. I'm faster, I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better. And he told me not to look up to Homelander. I don't know. Homelander doesn't seem like a bad model, a role model. Maybe I can be Homelander. What do you guys think? Anyway, now to the TV show that I started this video for. My Adventures of Superman is actually a great storyline. The story follows all of the key tropes that make Superman who Superman is. Superman arrives on a farm. He gets raised by the Kents. He goes to Metropolis, learns his powers, becomes Superman. In the middle of all of that, falls in love with Lois Lane. Lois Lane falls in love with him, and their buddy Jimmy is there for the ride. Great story. How did that story change it to make it interesting and new? Well, first thing we did was we changed his core power set. But hold on, I meant to say this before we get into this part. So the problem with Superman, and this is a part of this whole thing, I liked this series. I thought it was great. I thought it was a great alteration to his story. Although there are problems with what they did, I do like the way they changed the story, and we're going to talk about it. But core Superman fans did not like it. So I've mentioned this a few times, but my first comic book as a child was Superman time and time again. I was given to me by my father, who's a big Superman fan. He really is. And so I assumed that my dad, who I've spoken to about Superman many, many times, and he enjoyed Peter J. Tomasi's storyline, and I don't know how he felt about Brian Michael Bendis' stuff, but he liked a lot of Superman storylines, would enjoy this cartoon. On top of that, my nephew, who's only 11 years old, goes to visit my dad a lot, and because of that, I was like, oh, hey, with your grandkid, sit down, watch Superman. You guys can, it's a great cartoon. I think you'll like it. My dad did not like the show because they changed his power set and they changed the story. So core Superman fans want kind of boring Superman, but new Superman fans want a Superman that they can relate with. It's a weird situation with Superman, which comes from him being around for way too long. But anyway, back to the actual cartoon. The story got changed in a different way. The changes of the story are, is he evil? That's the big problem. I'm getting tired of evil Superman storylines. Now, we all knew he wasn't going to go evil, but the concept is presented relatively early. So the changes in the storyline are that when Superman landed on the planet Earth, it was actually in the middle of a Kryptonian invasion. Waller and General Lane were there to fight against this general invasion, and the invasion just kind of went away. I don't remember if they defeated it or they just pulled back. Whatever the reason, the invasion went away, and Superman's ship landed, and then he was adopted by the Kents. Story goes as normal. Except now, Superman is in Metropolis trying to court. Does anyone say courting? I shall court you, Miss Lane. I will court you. Anyway, tries to court her, and they decide that they're going to be together. In the time of all of this, Superman begins to learn his powers differently, which is the first thing my dad really didn't like about this. You see, Superman's powers are now unlocked through powering up. The way they do it kind of reminded me of Dragon Ball, where like he's getting his butt kicked. He's not doing as well as he could have done. And now he powers up to the next tier. And then he goes Ultra Instinct Superman. But either way, he was learning his powers that way, which is a change. I actually liked that because I thought it was kind of modernizing the concepts of Superman instead of just making him ultra powerful. But my dad, who loves classic Superman, did not like it. They then changed the storyline so that instead of Superman coming out to the world early on and being like, hey, I'm Superman, I'm here to save you all, he kind of works quietly. And it's up to Lois Lane and the Daily Planet to kind of reveal him to the world. But because he's working quietly and never admits what his true intentions are, which is to save everybody, everyone assumes that he might be a bad guy. General Lane and Waller both assume that he's probably there to start this invasion again. And so what that eventually boils down to is Superman has to prove himself, which he does, but then the invasion comes back and he has to work with a ghost version of himself. Or no, okay. So The concept of evil Superman shows up midway through when Mxyzptlk shows up and admitting that there's a multiverse of Supermans and Lois Lanes, but a ship involving a bunch of Lois Lanes show up and don't want to talk to Superman because some Supermen go evil and we can't trust Superman because he might be evil. And they tell this to their Lois Lane. In the middle of all of this, they give kryptonite to Jimmy Olsen. And then later on, after the multiversal world of Lois Lane's leaves, Superman proves himself. But then it comes back around in the ending where the invasion starts up again. And General Lane is like, Lois, my daughter, don't go with him. He sounds nothing like this. Lois, my daughter, don't go with Superman. Shakespearean? I don't know. It's just Benny being Benny. Anyway. And then she reveals that Superman could go evil, showing him this weird thing of evil Superman across the multiverse. But then Jimmy pulls out the kryptonite for some weird reason, which activates the invasion ship, and the invasion ship attacks everybody, and the robots go crazy, and the Superman has to work with the ghost of his father, Jor-El, who can't speak English, only speaks Kryptonese, and then they don't know what's going on, and then Superman eventually saves the day. That's what he does. But anyway, the stories that got a weird change. It's like the Kryptonians are an invading force. And then even the cliffhanger is that, yeah, Superman stopped this invading force, but the Kryptonians are still around, and they're still invading. And I'm assuming that's Zod at the ending, but they don't say who it is. But this comes back around to what the problem with Superman is. People find him more interesting evil. Why do they find him more interesting evil? Why do we have to change the story so much? Do you ever hear a story change to the Batman story? The Batman story is always the same. Kid goes to the movie theater with his parents to see Zorro. It's always Zorro, too. You notice that? They never even update the movie. It's always Zorro. Anyway, it comes out as Zorro. Joe Chill shoots the parents. Batman then goes to become Batman. The only alterations we ever get to that storyline is sometimes the parents were involved in the mob, sometimes not, and sometimes Batman goes off the train with Ra's al Ghul, sometimes not. Nothing drastic. But Superman, we get, now he's a Nazi. Like that's the direction we go with that. Superman doesn't have minor changes, although there is a storyline called The Nail in which there is one minor change, but that's the point of the story. One minor change changes everything. So anyway, the problem with Superman is that he's kind of boring when they do the classic storyline to newer readers, but the classic Superman fans want classic Superman, but modern day fans want Dragon Ball. So what do we get? How do we do all of this? Superman has been around for too long is the issue. There are literal generations of fans who want a specific Superman, while Batman has just stayed Batman. I don't know how that even functions, but it does. But what do you think? For the record, I enjoyed Supermanime. Thought it was a great show. I do recommend it to everybody, but apparently if you're a classic Superman fan, you won't like it. Keep that in mind. But I did enjoy it. If you want to see more in-depth reviews, Dan and Hassan over on our podcast channel, they're doing it over absolutely. So I'll link that channel down below. And if you want to see me talk about more manga and anime, because if you hadn't taken it from this video, I read those a lot. One Piece is the best thing ever. Anyway, go check that out over at Comicstorian. But let me know your thoughts on the Supermanime show, or what it's actually called, My Adventures with My Friend Superman, or just what you thought about it and what you think about Superman. What is your favorite era of Superman? Do you like 90s Superman, where he died fighting Doomsday and then we had 4 different weird Supermans? Do you like classic Superman, where the stories made no sense, where Superman could come out of his hands and he could drag entire planets behind him? Do you like depowered Superman from New 52? Because if you do, you're like one of 3. Do you like Peter J. Tomasi's Superman and Son series? Do you like Brian Michael Bendis' story of Metropolis? You see my point? Superman's got a lot of stuff. Do you just like Injustice? Do you like Nazi Superman? How about Communist Superman? Why is there a Nazi and a Communist Superman? Anyway, what is your favorite version of Superman? Because the problem with Superman, he's been around too long, to the point where people find him more interesting evil, to the point where it has to be a core plot point of will he go evil in the new Superman cartoon. I don't remember that being a core plot point in classic Superman animated series. Don't forget, check out my hot sauce if you want to support us. Go to GamerSupps, use the code COMICS, and I'll see you next time right here. The end!